The chief's only son lay on woven mats, his chest rising and falling like broken wings. Sweat poured down his face. His lips had turned the color of ash. Outside the palace, women wept. Men stood silent, fists clenched. If the heir died, the kingdom would crumble. Chaos would swallow them whole. Doctors came from distant lands. They carried leather bags filled with powders, oils, and strange instruments. One claimed the boy was cursed. Another said evil spirits lived in his blood. They burned incense. They chanted prayers. They sliced his arm and rubbed black paste into the wound. Nothing worked. The chief paced his compound like a caged lion. His eyes were red from sleepless nights. His wife sat beside their dying son, her voice hoarse from crying. The palace that once rang with laughter now smelled of death and desperation. Then, as the sun began to set, an elder with white hair and trembling hands stepped forward. His voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. "The answer exists," he whispered, eyes closed. "But you chased it away." The chief froze. His heart pounded. What had they done? Her name was Abeni. She was 17, thin as a reed, with eyes that held too much sadness for her age. She had no mother, no father, no home. Only the river knew her name. Every night, she slept on the cold sand near the water's edge, wrapped in a torn cloth that barely kept the mosquitoes away. Villagers called her river trash. Children threw stones at her and laughed. Women pulled their daughters away when she walked past. "Don't let that dirty thing touch you," they hissed. But Abeni did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears changed nothing. Instead, she moved quietly through the world, head down, invisible. During the day, she searched for food in the bushes. At night, when the moon rose high and the village slept, Abeni walked along the riverbank. Her hands moved carefully through the wet grass, picking leaves, roots, and flowers that grew only in shadow. The villagers saw her once, kneeling by the water, whispering to plants like they were people. They shook their heads. "That girl is strange," they muttered. "She talks to things that don't talk back." They did not know the river answered. Adizwa was the chief's daughter. She wore gold around her neck and silk wrapped around her waist. Her skin glowed from expensive oils. Her laughter filled every room she entered. Everyone admired her. Everyone feared her. But Adizwa had a secret. She hated Abeni with a fire that burned day and night. It started small like most hatred does. One day she saw villagers whispering near the river. "That homeless girl," one woman said, "she healed my son's fever with river herbs. The fever that wouldn't break for weeks, gone in one night." Adizwa's chest tightened. How could a nobody like Abeni receive praise? How could river trash be called special? It was an insult, a disgrace. She began watching Abeni closely, hiding behind trees, listening to conversations. Villagers spoke of the girl with quiet respect. Some left food near the riverbank for her. Others asked for her help in secret, ashamed to admit they trusted a homeless orphan more than the palace healers. Adizwa's jealousy grew like poison in her belly. One evening she stood before her mirror and made a vow. "I will destroy her," she whispered, her reflection smiling back coldly. "I will make them see her for the witch she truly is." Market day arrived with noise and color. Women sold yams, peppers, and smoked fish. Children ran between the stalls, chasing chickens. The air smelled of palm oil and fresh bread. Abeni walked slowly through the crowd, her head covered, hoping no one would notice her. But Adizwa had been waiting. She stepped forward, her voice loud and sharp. "Thief!" she screamed, pointing at Abeni. "That girl stole from my mother's shrine." The market went silent. All eyes turned to Abeni. She froze, her heart hammering. "I took nothing," she said quietly. "Liar!" Adizwa shouted. "She practices witchcraft by the river. I've seen her talking to spirits at night. She's the reason my brother is sick." The crowd gasped. Witchcraft. The word spread like fire. A man picked up a stone. A woman spat at Abeni's feet. "Demon," someone yelled. "Chase her out." Abeni tried to speak, but no one listened. Hands shoved her. Stones hit her back. She ran, tears streaming down her face, her feet bleeding as she stumbled out of the village. At the edge of the forest, she stopped and turned. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You will beg the river for mercy." Then she disappeared into the trees. That same night, the chief's son collapsed during dinner. His body jerked violently. His eyes rolled back. Blood poured from his nose and mouth, staining the white cloth beneath him. His mother screamed. Servants rushed to his side, but his body would not stop shaking. The chief shouted for the healers, his voice breaking with panic. They came quickly, carrying their bags and potions. They pressed herbs against his chest. They chanted louder. They slaughtered a goat and smeared its blood on his forehead. The boy's body finally went still. But it was not peace. It was worse. His breathing grew shallow. His skin turned cold. His lips moved but no words came out. He was slipping away. The chief fell to his knees beside his son. Please, he begged the healers. Save him. I will give you anything. The oldest healer shook his head slowly. This is beyond our power, chief. This sickness, it does not come from the body. It comes from something deeper. Fear filled the room like smoke. The palace servants whispered prayers. The chief's wife fainted. And outside, under the pale moonlight, the river turned dark and still as if holding its breath. By morning news had spread. Healers from neighboring villages arrived, their faces serious, their bags heavy with remedies. The chief welcomed them all, desperate for hope. The first healer demanded 10 goats. This boy is cursed by ancestors, he declared. Only blood sacrifice will save him. The goats were slaughtered. The boy did not wake. The second healer asked for gold and land. I must consult the spirits, she said, her eyes gleaming with greed. The chief gave her both. She burned incense for 3 days and nights. The boy grew weaker. A third healer arrived with strange masks and drums. He danced around the boy's body, shouting at invisible demons. The drums echoed through the palace. But when the dancing stopped, the boy's breath was even fainter. The chief sat alone in his courtyard, his head in his hands. His wealth meant nothing now. His power was useless. His son was dying and no amount of gold could stop it. That evening, as the sun set over the village, something strange happened. The river, which had always flowed clear and bright, turned dark. Its surface looked like oil, thick and unmoving. Villagers gathered at the banks, whispering in fear. The river is angry, they said. Something terrible is coming. Years before, when Abeni was only 12, a small boy wandered too far from the village. He climbed a tall tree to steal mangoes and fell hard onto the rocks below. His arm twisted at a horrible angle. Blood poured from a gash on his head. Abeni found him crying by the riverbank. She had no cloth to stop the bleeding, no adult to call for help. But she did not panic. She knelt beside him, her small hands moving quickly. From the river's edge, she gathered smooth leaves and thick roots. She crushed them between 2 stones, mixing them with river water until they became a green paste. Gently, she pressed the paste onto the boy's wounds. It will hurt, she whispered, but it will heal. The boy screamed at first, but then the pain began to fade. Within minutes, the bleeding stopped. Within an hour, the swelling went down. By morning, he could move his arm again. The boy's mother wept with gratitude. You saved him, she said, trying to give Abeni food. But the girl only smiled and disappeared back to the river. That boy was the chief's son. He had forgotten her face. But the river never forgets. And neither did Abeni. The blind elder sat under the ancient baobab tree, his white eyes staring at nothing, yet seeing everything. Villagers came to him only when all else failed. He was older than memory, his voice like wine through dry leaves. The chief approached him slowly, his pride heavy on his shoulders. Elder, he said, his voice breaking. My son is dying. No healer can save him. What must I do? The old man was silent for a long time. Then he tilted his head toward the river. The river spoke to a girl once, he said quietly. She listened. She learned. She knew the language of roots and water. The chief frowned. What girl? The one you chased away, the elder replied. The one your people beat and cursed. The one your daughter called a witch. The chief's blood went cold. His mind flashed back to the market, to the screaming crowd, to Abeni's tear-streaked face as she ran into the forest. She was nobody, the chief whispered, trying to convince himself. The elder shook his head slowly. The river does not choose the proud. It chooses the broken. And you broke her. The words hung in the air like a curse. The chief turned away, his chest tight with shame and fear. His son was dying, and the only one who could save him was the girl he had destroyed. The chief returned to the palace, his mind racing. He could not accept it. He would not beg a homeless girl, a nobody, someone the village had cast out like garbage. His pride screamed against it. We will find another way, he told his wife firmly. There are healers in the northern kingdoms. We will send for them. His wife looked at him with hollow eyes. And if they fail too, she whispered. How much more time do we have? The chief had no answer. He walked to his son's room and stood at the doorway. The boy lay motionless, his chest barely moving. His skin had turned gray. His lips were cracked and dry. Then something strange happened. The boy's mouth moved. His voice was faint, barely a whisper. Abeni. The chief stepped closer. What did you say? Abeni, the boy whispered again, his eyes still closed. The river girl, she helped me before? The chief's heart stopped. His son was calling for her. Even in his dying state, the boy remembered. The universe itself was screaming the truth at him. But still the chief stood frozen. His pride was a chain around his neck. He turned away from his son's bed and walked into the night, alone with his shame. The next morning the chief finally gave the order. Find the girl, he told his messengers. Search the forest. Search the riverbanks. Bring her back. The messengers rode out on horseback, their eyes scanning the trees and bushes. They called her name. They followed the river's path. They searched for hours, then days. Finally they found something. Deep in the forest, hidden among thick trees, was a small hut made of sticks and dried leaves. It was simple, but it had been built with care. One of the messengers dismounted and walked toward it. Abeni, he called. We come with a message from the chief. Silence. He pushed the door open. Inside, the hut was empty. But worse than that, it had been burned. The walls were blackened. The roof had collapsed. Ash covered the ground. She's gone, the messenger whispered. They searched the surrounding area, calling her name until their voices went hoarse. But there was no trace of her. No footprints. No sign of life. The messengers returned to the palace with heavy hearts. The hut was destroyed, they reported. We do not know where she is. The chief's face turned pale. Had she died? Had wild animals taken her? Or worse, had she simply vanished, taking the cure with her? But Abeni was not dead. She was deep in the forest, far from the village, in a place where the river widened and the trees grew ancient and tall. And she was not alone. Beside her sat Ayaromi, the river woman. Some said she was a spirit. Others said she was older than the earth itself. Her skin was dark and smooth like river stones. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Her voice was soft but carried the weight of 1,000 storms. They are looking for you, Ayaromi said. Abeni nodded. I know. The boy is dying. I know that too. Ayaromi studied her carefully. And still you hesitate. Abeni stared at the water. They beat me. They called me evil. They destroyed my home. And now they want my help. Ayaromi placed a hand on her shoulder. You have learned much from the river, child. You know the names of plants, the secrets of roots, the songs of healing. But there is one lesson left. Abeni looked up. What lesson? That healing is not just for the body, Ayaromi said. It is for the soul. And sometimes the hardest person to heal is yourself. Abeni's eyes filled with tears. Ayaromi continued. The cure exists, but it demands a sacrifice. What sacrifice? Abeni whispered. Ayaromi's gaze was steady. Truth, humility, and public confession. Abeni sat in silence, the weight of Ayaromi's words pressing down on her chest. What do you mean? She finally asked. Ayaromi stood and walked to the river's edge. She dipped her hand into the water, and it glowed faintly beneath her fingers. The sickness in that boy is not natural, she said. It was born from lies, from pride, from cruelty. To cure him, the truth must be spoken aloud. The proud must kneel. The guilty must confess. Abeni's heart pounded. You want me to make them admit what they did? Not just them, Ayaromi said, turning to face her. You must also speak your truth. You must stand before the village and say what they made you feel. You must demand justice, not revenge. Abeni shook her head. They will never listen. They will, Ayaromi said firmly, because their son's life depends on it. Abeni looked down at her hands. They were scarred from years of sleeping on cold ground, from gathering herbs and thorny bushes, from surviving alone. And if I do this, if I give them the cure, what happens to me? Ayaromi smiled gently. That depends on you, child. The river does not choose your path. It only opens the door. You must decide whether to walk through it. Abeni closed her eyes. The answer was forming inside her, slowly, like dawn breaking over dark water. By the time Abeni and Ayaromi reached the village, word had already spread. Villagers lined the path, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stared. Abeni walked slowly, her head held high. She wore a simple white cloth that Ayaromi had given her. Her feet were bare, but her steps were steady. She no longer looked like the broken girl they had chased away. She looked like something else entirely. Something powerful. The villagers began to kneel, one by one, their faces filled with shame. Forgive us, an old woman whispered. We were wrong. Please save the boy, a man begged. We will give you anything. Abeni said nothing. She walked past them all, her eyes fixed on the palace ahead. The crowd followed her, silent and trembling. When she reached the palace gates, the chief stood waiting. His face was pale. His hands shook. Behind him, his wife wept openly. Abeni, the chief said, his voice cracking. Please, I beg you, save my son. Abeni stopped. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, without a word, she turned and began walking back toward the river. The crowd gasped. Wait, the chief shouted. Where are you going? Abeni paused and looked over her shoulder. Begging is not enough, she said quietly. You must do more. The chief stood frozen, his pride and desperation at war inside him. His wife collapsed to her knees. Please, she cried. What more can we do? Abeni turned to face them fully. Her voice was calm but firm. Kneel, she said. Not just you, chief. Everyone who threw stones. Everyone who called me evil. Everyone who laughed while I suffered. Kneel publicly and admit what you did. The crowd murmured in shock. A chief does not kneel. It was unthinkable. It was humiliation. But the chief looked back at the palace, where his son lay dying. He thought of the boy's laughter, his bright eyes, his future that was slipping away like sand through fingers. Slowly, the chief lowered himself to his knees. His expensive robes dragged in the dirt. His head bowed. Tears streamed down his face. I was wrong, he said, his voice shaking. I allowed cruelty. I allowed pride to blind me. I chased away the one person who could have helped us from the beginning. One by one the villagers knelt too. The market women. The young men. Even the children. They bowed their heads in shame. But Abeni did not move. She stood tall, her eyes searching the crowd. Where is Adizwa? She asked. Where is the one who started it all? Silence. Then, slowly, Adizwa stepped forward, her face twisted with anger and fear. Adizwa stood before Abeni, her golden jewelry glinting in the sun. But her eyes were cold and hard. You want me to kneel? She spat. To you. Abeni's gaze did not waver. I want you to tell the truth. I have nothing to say to you, Adizwa hissed. Abeni stepped closer. You lied. You called me a thief and a witch. You turned the village against me because you were jealous. Because people respected me even though I had nothing. The crowd gasped. Adizwa's face flushed red. That's not true. It is, Abeni said calmly. And you know it. The river knows it. Even your own heart knows it. Adizwa's hands trembled. She opened her mouth to deny it again, but no words came. Shame and rage fought inside her. Then something strange happened. The river behind them began to rise. Not violently, but slowly, steadily, as if something ancient was waking beneath the surface. The water climbed up the banks, inching toward the village. Villagers screamed and backed away. The river, someone shouted. It's angry. Ayaomi's voice rang out clear and strong. The river does not lie. It sees all. Remembers all. Speak the truth, child, or the water will speak for you. Adizwa stared at the rising water, terror filling her eyes. The river was coming for her. The water moved with purpose, flowing past the other homes untouched and heading straight toward Adizwa's house. Villagers scattered, their screams filling the air. Stop it. Adizwa cried, stumbling backward. Make it stop. But the river did not stop. It poured through the doors and windows of her house, filling the rooms, rising higher and higher. Within minutes, the entire structure was flooded. Furniture floated. Expensive fabrics were ruined. Everything Adizwa had treasured was destroyed. The chief grabbed his daughter's arm. Confess, he shouted. Tell the truth before it's too late. Adizwa fell to her knees, her pride shattered. It was me, she screamed, sobbing. I lied. I was jealous. I wanted to destroy her because people praised her and not me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The moment the words left her mouth, the river stopped. The water held still for a heartbeat, then slowly began to recede, flowing back toward its banks as if nothing had happened. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Adizwa knelt in the mud, her fine clothes soaked and ruined, her face buried in her hands. Abeni looked down at her. There was no joy in her eyes. No satisfaction. Only sadness. You had everything, Abeni said softly. And you used it to hurt someone who had nothing. The villagers turned on Adizwa, their anger loud and raw. Liar, they shouted. You destroyed an innocent girl. The crowd surged forward, voices raised in fury. Punish her, someone yelled. She must pay for what she did. Adizwa curled into herself, shaking with fear. The chief stepped in front of his daughter, his face filled with shame but his voice firm. She will face justice, he said. But not like this. Not with anger. The crowd hesitated. All eyes turned to Abeni. She was the one who had been wronged. She was the one who had suffered. The decision was hers. Abeni stood silently, staring at Adizwa. Memories flooded her mind. The stones thrown at her back. The names shouted at her. The nights she cried herself to sleep by the river, cold and alone. Iromi's voice whispered in her ear, soft as wind. What you do now will define you, child. Revenge is easy. Forgiveness is power. Abeni closed her eyes. The river beside her hummed quietly, waiting. It had shown its strength. Now it wanted to see hers. Finally, Abeni opened her eyes and spoke. I forgive you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Adizwa looked up, disbelief on her face. But forgiveness does not mean there are no consequences, Abeni continued, her voice firm. You will give up your title. You will give up your gold. You will serve the village, not rule it. You will learn what it means to have nothing. Adizwa's face crumpled, but she nodded, broken and humbled. Adizwa removed her golden necklace with trembling hands and placed it on the ground. Then her bracelets, her rings, her silk wrapper. One by one, she stripped away the symbols of her status until she stood in simple cloth, no different from any other villager. The chief watched his daughter with tears in his eyes. He had raised her with pride, and pride had destroyed her. Thank you, he whispered to Abeni. You gave her mercy. Abeni nodded. Mercy is not weakness. But it must be earned. The crowd began to murmur in agreement. Some still glared at Adizwa, but the violent anger had faded. Justice had been served, not through bloodshed but through truth. Then, slowly the river began to change. The dark, oily surface that had troubled the villagers for days started to clear. The water turned bright again, sparkling under the sun like liquid diamonds. Iromi smiled. The river is satisfied, she said. Truth has been spoken. Humility has been shown. Now the healing can begin. Abeni turned toward the palace. Take me to the boy. The chief led her inside quickly, the crowd following at a respectful distance. The palace was quiet, filled with the smell of incense and fear. Servants stepped aside as Abeni walked through the halls, her bare feet making no sound on the stone floors. When she reached the boy's room, she paused at the doorway. The time had come. The boy lay still on the mat, his breathing shallow and faint. His mother sat beside him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw Abeni, she stood quickly. Please, she whispered. Please save him. Abeni knelt beside the boy and placed a hand on his forehead. His skin was cold as river stones. She closed her eyes and listened. Not with her ears but with something deeper. She could hear the sickness inside him, like a dark whisper, feeding on fear and lies. Bring me water from the river, she said. Not from a bucket. It must be carried in your hands. The chief himself ran to the river. He cupped his hands and carried the water back carefully, his heart pounding. Abeni took the water and sprinkled it over the boy's chest. Then, from a small pouch at her waist, she brought out dried leaves and roots. She crushed them between her palms and mixed them with the river water, whispering words only the river could understand. She pressed the mixture to the boy's lips. Drink, she commanded softly. The boy did not move. His mother gasped, fresh tears falling. Abeni did not panic. She placed both hands on the boy's chest and closed her eyes. River, she whispered, give him back. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the boy's chest stopped moving entirely. He stopped breathing. His mother screamed. The room erupted in chaos. The chief grabbed Abeni's arm. What have you done? He shouted. But Abeni remained calm. Wait, she said firmly. Just wait. The mother collapsed over her son's body, sobbing. The servants wailed. The chief's face twisted in horror and rage. Then, as the first ray of sunrise broke through the window, the boy gasped. His chest rose sharply. His eyes flew open. He coughed once, twice, and then breathed deeply, fully, his color returning like paint spreading across a canvas. Mother, he whispered. His mother screamed, but this time with joy. She pulled him into her arms, weeping and laughing at the same time. My son. My son. The chief fell to his knees, his hands covering his face. Thank you, he sobbed. Thank you. Abeni stood slowly, exhaustion written on her face. She looked at the boy who was now sitting up, confused but alive. He looked at her and his eyes widened with recognition. You, he whispered. You're the girl from the river. You helped me before. Abeni smiled faintly. Yes. Outside, the river glowed softly in the morning light, its surface shimmering like gold. Villagers gathered at the banks, pointing and whispering in awe. The river is blessing us, they said. The river has forgiven us. Iomi stood by the water, smiling knowingly. The balance had been restored. News of the miracle spread like wildfire. By midday, the entire village gathered outside the palace, chanting Abeni's name. Healer. Savior. Blessed one. The chief emerged with Abeni at his side. He raised his hands for silence. This girl, he announced, his voice strong and clear, has saved my son. She has saved this village. She will be given a home in the palace. She will have gold, land, and a place of honor at my side. The crowd cheered. But Abeni stepped forward and raised her hand. The cheering stopped. I thank you, chief, she said calmly. But I do not want gold. I do not want a place in your palace. The chief looked confused. Then what do you want? Abeni turned to face the villagers. I want to return to the river. That is my home. That is where I belong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The chief frowned. But you deserve more than that. You deserve respect, comfort, a title. Abeni shook her head. Respect is not given by titles. It is earned by actions. I do not need your gold to prove my worth. Iomi stepped forward from the crowd, her presence commanding attention. The girl speaks wisdom, she said. She does not seek power over others. She seeks purpose. Abeni nodded. I will become guardian of the river. I will heal those who come to me, rich or poor, proud or humble. That is my calling. The chief bowed his head. Then we will honor your choice. A new structure was built by the river, simple but sturdy. It had walls made of wood and a roof woven from palm leaves. Inside, shelves were filled with herbs, roots, and dried flowers. A mat lay in the corner for rest. Abeni moved in quietly, content. Villagers came to her now with respect, not scorn. They brought their sick children, their aching elders, their wounded hearts. And Abeni healed them, one by one, never asking for payment, only for kindness. The chief kept his word. He declared new laws. No one in this village will be cast out for being different, he announced. No one will be harmed for being poor or misunderstood. We will honor those the world rejects, for they may carry the answers we seek. Adizwa served her punishment with a bowed head. She fetched water, swept the market, and helped the elderly. The villagers watched her closely at first, still angry, but over time they softened. Humility was changing her. One day, Adizwa came to Abeni's hut by the river. She stood at the doorway nervous. May I speak with you? She asked quietly. Abeni looked up from her work. Come in. Adizwa entered and knelt. I don't expect you to forget what I did, she said, her voice shaking. But I want you to know. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Abeni studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. I believe you. Years passed. The village prospered. Crops grew tall. The river flowed clear and strong. Children played by the banks without fear. And Abeni became a legend, the girl who spoke to water, who healed with humility, who forgave when others would have taken revenge. The chief's son grew into a strong young man. He often visited Abeni by the river, bringing her food and helping her gather herbs. You saved my life twice, he told her once. I will never forget that. Adizwa too changed. She became a teacher, helping young girls learn to read and write. She told them her story openly without shame. I was cruel once, she said. But cruelty is a choice. So is kindness. Choose wisely. The chief grew old, but his heart remained humble. He often sat by the river at sunset, watching Abeni work. I almost lost everything, he told her one evening. My son. My honor. My soul. All because I was too proud to see the truth. Abeni smiled gently. Pride is a heavy burden. But you let it go. Because you showed me how, the chief replied. The river sang softly that evening, its voice like a lullaby. The village slept peacefully, knowing they were protected not by walls or weapons, but by something far stronger. Truth, humility, and a girl who had learned to forgive. 15 years later, children gathered by the river as the sun set, their faces bright with curiosity. An elder with white hair sat on a wooden stool, a walking stick resting beside him. He was the village storyteller now, his voice still strong despite his age. Tell us a story, the children begged. The elder smiled. Have I told you about the girl who spoke to the river? Yes, they shouted. But tell it again. And so he did. He spoke of Abeni, the homeless orphan who was chased away, who returned to heal the chief's son, who chose forgiveness over revenge. The children listened, wide-eyed, their imaginations painting pictures of glowing rivers and miraculous cures. When the story ended, a small girl raised her hand. "Is it true?" she asked. The elder pointed to a simple hut by the riverbank, smoke rising gently from its roof. "Go and see for yourself. She still lives there." The children ran to the hut, laughing and calling Abeni's name. She emerged, older now, her hair streaked with gray, but her smile still kind. The children surrounded her, asking questions, begging for stories of the river. Abeni laughed and sat among them. "The river teaches many things," she said. "But the most important lesson is this: kindness is the strongest medicine. It heals what no herb can touch." And so, the story ends where it began. By the river. With a girl the world rejected. With a truth the proud could not see. The narrator leans forward, his voice soft but certain. "You see, the river does not choose the powerful. It does not choose the rich. It chooses those whose hearts have been broken open, for only broken hearts have room for grace." He pauses, letting the words settle. Abeni was never meant to live in a palace. She was meant to be a bridge between the forgotten and the remembered, between the hurting and the healed. The fire crackles. The children lean closer. "And the river?" the narrator continues. "The river still flows. It still listens. It still chooses. Even now, somewhere in the world there is a girl like Abeni. Rejected. Cast out. Called names. And the river is whispering to her, teaching her, preparing her." He looks directly at you. Because the world always needs healing.